Hi, thanks, Andy. And hello, everyone, and welcome to this first session of the Crime, Justice and Society seminar series in the first session in the second semester. So my name is Milana Tripkovic. I'm a lecturer at Edinburgh Law School, and I have a great pleasure to introduce to you today our guest. His name is Professor Gustavo Fondevila, and he visits us, or he comes to us from the División de Estudios Jurídicos, Centro de Investigación y Docencia Económicas in Mexico. So Gustavo today will be talking about a very particular topic, which is the female imprisonment. But in general, Gustavo is a professor and researcher, and he works on a number of different topics from a particular perspective, which is the empirical and comparative quantitative criminology. So I've looked at his Google Scholar page, which is full of a number of very different academic outputs, and Gustavo has worked on really an impressive number of very different topics. I think he's kind of most extensively worked and published on issues of imprisonment, particularly female imprisonment, penal politics, policing. He's also worked on a number of different crime and punishment related topics in the context of Mexico and the region. But he's also worked on topics connected to the penal process, courts, and many other things. So really a very, very long list of various topics. So today he will be presenting something that's connected to his recent work, which is on the relationship between prison violence and criminal government within prisons of the region. And hopefully you've all read a brief introduction to his today's presentation, so I don't want to spoil it for you in advance. But what I found really interesting is that his presentation starts from a genuine puzzle, and this genuine puzzle is connected to the fact that we would assume that female prisons or prisons for women, given the fact that they are that conditions of imprisonment are usually much better in those prisons than in male prisons, we would expect a lower level of violence. But at least in the context in which Gustavo will talk about today, this isn't the case, and the level of violence in female prisons is very high. So what the presentation is trying to do is actually look into the reasons or the determinants of such circumstances. So I won't prolong this too long. I'll just say welcome to Gustavo. It's a pleasure to have you, and we look forward to your presentation. Just a quick note, Gustavo has up to 40 minutes, which he doesn't have to use if he doesn't want to. And then later on, I'll open the floor for questions. So welcome, Gustavo. It's good to have you as our guest today.
Wow, your presentation is better than me. That is the better presentation I ever hear about me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You had a wonderful presentation. Well, thank you very much for having me here. I am really, really honored, and I feel happy by the invitation of Andy and Richard Park, I think. Well, before we start, I would like to say that the violence in female prisons is really a very underexplored issue in prison study, most of all in our region, but in the whole world. I think if you write right now in a scholar searcher, you will find, I think, I don't know, 10,000 papers about violence in male prison. But if you write violence in female prison, I think if you are lucky, you will find, I don't know, 40, 50 papers about that. That shows something about the interest of the literature about this issue. There is some reasons to explain that. I think in our regions, but in the whole world too, I think the women represent just 4, 5, maybe 6% of all the incarcerated population. In Latin America, they commit minor crimes like theft, non-violent robbery, I don't know, fraud, or even when we have women killers, we usually find that situation. That is a middle-aged women that kill their husband after a life of domestic violence. It doesn't sound like the very typical criminal in our region who manage a criminal organization or who commit a very serious damage to other people or violent robberies and so on. When we compare, that is just an intuition, when we compare, for example, a weekend in a Brazilian prison in north of Brazil, when during a fight between gang members of different gangs, prison gangs, you can have 40 deaths just in a weekend. Well, we used to have very quiet and very pacific female prisons, you know. But there is another explanation for that. We have a growing body of feminist criminology in Mexico that says that we traditionally have a gender perception, and we study the problem of violence in prison from a male perspective of what violence means. I will try to be a middleman between the two arguments because I agree both. That's right. It's most interesting for me to study the homicide in prison that may be what violence means for a woman. That's right. That's right. And that is easy to get published, that paper, for example. You know. Well, I will start right now with my presentation. I didn't make. Are you seeing that?
Yes,
yeah?
It works. Yep.
Okay. I didn't make too technical PowerPoint as we love to make in my institution with a very complex and sophisticated model to explain a little bit of the reality. What I try to do, and I hope having done that I have done that, is a meaningful presentation with a very controversial idea, with a couple of statistical tests, very simple, very basic, a C-test and just a simple regression, just to suggest that maybe I am right. Well, my hypothesis is that the women prisons in Latin America became more violent than men prisons. Of course, this is proportional, and that is in the last year. Why is that relevant for us? Well, because this is an issue understudied in Latin America, and this is very relevant for prison policies. You can have their human rights problem, human rights violation, of course. The prisons in violence is a predictor of recidivism. More violent prisons, you have higher levels of recidivism. Well, you cannot have real rehabilitation programs in a prison that is very, very violent. And that means social cost in Latin America, that means a higher social cost, and of course the problem of safety and inmates guard. You know, what is new here? Well, I think, and I will try to show you, that we have a new, changing and challenging situation in our prisons. And I will support my idea on a new comparative statistical data coming from an inmate survey. I will talk a little bit about that, coming from an inmate survey made in the region, in 8 countries of the region in the last year by the United Nations Development Program. My explanation for that, and that is just an intuition, and I put all the statistical proof there, is that the explanation for that increasing and rising violent female prison is a problem of drug markets in prison. That means that drugs play really a role. Well, what says the literature about that? Well, we have 2 big explanations for violence in prison, but keep in mind that the feminist criminology says that all that literature is focused on male violence in prison. That's very important. The first theory, the first big group of theories is the potential theory. That means individual factor, focus on person, you know. we have the demographics. Youngest people are more violent than oldest people. The race, that is for us, this is an American problem, not a Latin American problem. Education, low levels of scholarity means immediately a prediction that you will have more violent people in prisons. The criminals factors, the crime type, if you committed a violent crime, this is a predictor that you will use violence to fix problems in prisons. The sentences, for example, if you have a long life sentences, you have nothing to lose if you kill someone else in prison, you know. Previous arrest, that means for us previous sentences, previous violence, and that means that you have a criminal career. You used to have violence in your life, and violence is a regular way to fix problems for you. That is a street code. We don't use that. This is importation of gangs called prisons, and psychological. That is aggression, depression, self-esteem, social support, and criminal mentality. I don't use that factor. It's impossible for us to prove that, to have data about that. But the other group of theories, that is the situational factors. That means that the building can play a role in the violence. For example, we have homicides always in the bathroom, in the shower, you know, because the people are naked there, and there is some reasons to explain that. So the building design can make that there is some concentration of violence in some place of the prison. For example, without cameras, video cameras there. The staff, if you have just a security staff, or you have lawyers, and you have social workers there, this is a predictor to for violence. The time is not the same to kill someone else in the morning that in the night in a prison. The location and the overpopulation. The overpopulation is really a very well accepted predictor of violence, and we have in the regions a deep and serious problem of overpopulation. We will take this predictor for us. And the living standards, you know, that is a problem in our prison, because if you don't have drinking water, for example, and that is very common, a very regular situation. In Mexico City too, you know, not in the worst prison of the region. No, in Mexico City you can problem of lack of drinking water, or you don't have enough food, or you don't have a place to sleep. That is related to overpopulation too, and so on. The administration, and if you have rehabilitation, a strong rehabilitation program in the prison, that is a predictor that you will have low levels of violence. That is what literature says, and my strategy will be to take some predictors of that and to compare that with the data we have from the regions, and to compare this data with this predictor, with this literature between male and female prisons. So easy like that. So our data right now, we have administrative records, and it was not easy to get that information. We have found the national penitentiary system, social demographic, sentences, criminal profile, and inmate population. I mean the overpopulation. We can know that. That is always data coming from the state, and in Latin America we don't always trust. Absolutely, we have an absolute trust about the information coming from the state in this issue, you know. And we have at the same time, and that is really new, and that is amazing, an inmate survey with the same questionnaire, 300 questions with 8,000 people interviewed in 8 countries of the region. That is amazing. That is new. And we have regions like Buenos Aires, Mexico City, and Sao Paulo. That is big city, because it's very expensive to make an inmate survey, a national inmate survey. But don't worry about that, because, for example, Sao Paulo has now 250,000 inmates. Just Sao Paulo, just a big city, you know. The whole Brazil has 6 100,000 people incarcerated, and just Sao Paulo, almost a half. This is really a big trend of incarceration as a solution for the security problems in the region. So Sao Paulo is just a universe. Mexico City, the same situation, and Buenos Aires, the same situation. And we have national surveys: Chile, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Honduras, and Peru. We have here, for people who don't know the regions, we have the three biggest countries of the regions. We have, I think, Chile, that is Chile is our Norwegian, you know, is our Sweden. They have three homicides every 100,000 inhabitants. That's it for us, Europe. And we have, in comparison, Salvador and Honduras, that they have 18, 19 homicides every 100,000 inhabitants. So we have very violent and poor countries. The richest and biggest countries, Mexico City, Sao Paulo, Brazil has, I think, 200 million people. Mexico has 110 million people, and so on. The biggest, the richest, the poorest, the more pacific, and the more violent. So we can have here, I think, an initial but a big picture, a good picture of the region. And I will take from that in my service the living standards questions, the victimization questions about female and male, I mean the institutional violence, theft, assault, and sexual assault. I take the predictor that, of course, is better for my hypothesis, and I will try to impress you with the results of that, with the findings of this work. Well, my strategy is, I already told you, this is to contrast literature correlative with descriptive data, just descriptive data. I mean descriptions of age, crime, sentences, overpopulation, and living standard. That is coming from the literature. And I will make some inferential statistics, but I will ask you to don't stop in the inferential statistics. I will try to prove that my hypothesis is that the drugs play a role to explain that increasing violence in female prison. I will make two proofs: a proportion test, a C test with level of violence, institutional violence, theft of belongings, and sexual violence, and I will make a correlation with just a regression with drugs. So let's start with the literature relative and descriptive data. We have here the age. Remember that the youngest is the youngest people more violence. You know, as you can see, that is percentage. Sorry about the zero dot and the number. The number is the percent of people in prison who is 18 to 25 years old. As you can see here, the first data is against my hypothesis, because the youngest people are women. Almost 80% of people in the prison. That is a proportion, because we have, remember, the women in prison represent just 4%, 5% of the whole incarcerated people. This is a proportion. But men are 17% of people incarcerated. But we have there a flow of inmates. You know, that is the people that who is getting inside, and in 3, 4, 5 years they get released. But after 26 to 35 are the men, the youngest men, are more than the women. Here is where I would like to stop, because the biggest proportions of people in our prisons is from 26 to 55 years old. And there we have a biggest proportion of men. So after this first table, we can say that maybe the male prisons are, according to age, maybe more violent than female prisons. Let's go to the type of crime. That I think that is here my hypothesis. The homicide, we have more men than women. Women commit really minor crimes. Look at that. We have bodily harm, 9%, almost 10% of men, like I'm saying right now, 2% of men and 1.7% of women. Sexual offense, and please keep in mind this data because we will see after that what is going on in terms of sexual aggression in a prison. So our sexual offenders in Latin America are really men. That is a problem of masculinity, you know. 15% of people incarcerated are men, in contrast with 1% of women incarcerated by sexual aggression. You see? And I want to highlight here to drug crimes that we have something contrasting here because almost 40%, look at Peru, 70% of incarcerated women are there by crimes related to drugs. That is the first thing that maybe the problem is drugs. But let me go to the next table. The sentence length. And again, here we have a really strong predictor. Look at that. The harsher sentences are for men because they commit more serious crimes than women. From 11 to 15, 16 to 20, 21 to 50. That is really a long sentence. It's not a lifelong sentence, but it's a long sentence. And again, I will make an overview of that. But again, all the predictors are pointing out men, not to women, as predictor of violence in prisons. The next one is the rehabilitation programs. That is when you see that, just is the men get involved in rehabilitation program more in a sport program than in a work program or educational program. That is a reason for that. That means in our prison that means soccer in the backyard of the prison. That is the rehabilitation program and a sport rehabilitation program. But when you go to the very more interesting and more serious rehabilitation, a real rehabilitation program, like the work program to teach people to do something in the job market when you get released, or the educational programs, very important in the region, you see more participation of women than men. So in here, you can say that again, all the predictors are pointing out men. That agree with that much with our intuition about our prison, you know. The living standard, and that's very, very, very important because that is as overpopulation, that is really a strong predictor of violence in prison. It's not the same if you have a good medical attention or you don't have any medical attention at all, like in Salvador, for example, or if you have enough food to eat, or if you have a public phone to call your family, or you have something to read like newspaper and books. I have chosen some indicators of living standard from the inmate survey. That this information is coming from the inmate, not from the national penitentiary system of each country. And again, if you can see, the women really live better than men in the Latin American prison. And there is a big difference. Look, for example, the public phone. There is a reason for that, of course, because usually they need to have a strong tie with the family because they are mother and they have kids outside, for example. and men don't care about the kids outside. Well, yes, that is the gender perspective about this issue. You know, if you go to in a weekend to a Latin American prison, you will see that all the women inside are receiving the kids and receiving their own mothers, and they are receiving the family. And when you go to a male prison, men are usually attending the girlfriend, for example. The girlfriends is the most important visit they have. This is a gender problem too, I know. Look at that, medical attention is very, very important, you know, and the women in our prisons have better medical attention than men. They complain a lot to have medical attention, and the penitentiary system react to that. Men don't usually complain about medical attention because they are real machos. That's why they are in prisons, and they have to show the other guys that they are not weak. There is a lot of gender problems here to explain that. But according to my hypothesis, I will say here that women live better than men in Latin American prisons. And that is another predictor that said to us that maybe the female prison will be more pacific and quiet, less violent than male prisons. So the overpopulation, and that is really a strong predictor. If you have, for example, like in El Salvador, 50 persons living in a place designed for 7 or 8 persons or 10 persons, and that is very usual. For example, in the prison for gang members, they really live there, but they have no place to sleep and so on. You will have violence problems related with violence and with the lack of space, the lack of intimacy, the lack of a bathroom, the lack of a lot of things that we think that is basic for our living standards. Look at that. That is really a strong predictor of violence in prisons. And again, and we have no doubt about that, all the male prisons in the region are most populated, they have overpopulation more than women. They have the women, they have a reasonable situation. Look at that. The last year I took, for example, in Argentina, 88% of occupation. It's very reasonable. The minimum level is 100% of occupation. That's if the prison is full. I will highlight the situation of El Salvador, where in a male prison you have 300% of overpopulation. It's impossible to live there. And in contrast with that, we have an overpopulated female prison, but not so serious as male. That's indicator, again, say to me that we can expect more pacific female prison. They live better, they commit less serious crime, they don't have almost have overpopulations, they are older than men, and so on. We can have maybe a reasonable situation in female prisons according to levels of violence in comparison with men. So I make here an overview of my first findings with the two theories, you know, the importation theories and the deprivation one. The age, the male, we have more men, more youngest men than women. In crime, we have more homicide in the male population than in female. Sentences, we have longest sentences with men than women. Again, rehabilitation, we have more participation of women in rehabilitation program. So that really matches with our perception of what does it mean a female prisons in the region, and I think it's the word too, you know. living standard. I just took the medical attention because it's very important for women too, you know. They have better medical attention than male prisons, and overpopulation. I took Salvador. That is, I think, if you see this overview of the findings, you will immediately say that we can really expect less violence in female prisons than in prisons. Let's go now to the comparative level of violence by gender, and we will find there an amazing situation, really difficult to explain. The first slide I show you, that is institutional violence, and that goes against my hypothesis. You know, you can have more, you will find more institutional violence in a male prison than in a female prison. I can accept that. You choose. Can you imagine, for example, in a violent prisons, male guards beating inmates? Yes, absolutely yes. But you can imagine female guards beating female inmates? No. There is a lot of things there to explain that. That is a problem of gender. That is a problem of that we live too in a patriarchal society, you know, in a patriarchal community where it is acceptable to understand the male violence, but it's not acceptable to understand a god beating a woman. But it's okay, that is just institutional violence. If you remember my original hypothesis, it's not my main hypothesis because I want to study the violence inmate to inmate, not the violence guards inmate. That is another problem. But I showed that to just to see that we have more violence, institutional violence in male prison than in female prisons. But this is very interesting, and that is the first time in our regions that we took the theft of belongings. That is a C test, that is a proportion test, that we try to prove that that difference is really significant. Just it, nothing more, just it. But that is the first time, according to gender perception of the gender criminology in our region, that we take the theft of belongings as a factor of violence, you know, because we usually took, for example, death, or we usually took bodily harm or something like that. That is the first time that we see the theft of belongings, the robbery, and that is really amazing for us. We have higher levels of theft of belongings in female prisons than in male prisons. That's really weird and very difficult to explain according to our predictors, you know. But I have a better title for you. The next one is assault. This is not like my hypothesis. This table is not a black and white table like the other ones. But that is here something that is difficult to explain. Why in Chile, why in Costa Rica, and why in El Salvador and Honduras we have more assault, violent assault in a female prison, and this difference is again solved by the insistent, is again significant that in a men's prison. Impossible, unthinkable, you know, this is impossible to explain according to our predictors, you know. And the next one is that is sexual violence. That is our best finding. That is really fascinating, you know, because if you think in a sexual offender in UK, in Scotland, in Honduras, in Uruguay, in Paraguay, in Africa, you think immediately in a man. Did you remember? Let me show the crime type. Look at that. Where is the sexual offense? Look at that. Just 1%. 1.8% of all the incarcerated people in female prisons are related to a sexual offense. It's not rape, it's just a sexual aggression, you know, that the whole universe of sexual aggression. But that 15% of men incarcerated, they are raped. That means a really serious harm, you know, a very important, very deep, and really problematic for victims, that aggression. And now, when you go to prisons, here, sexual violence, you find that in Brazil, you have more sexual aggression in the female population than in the male population. That's really a new and challenging situation. And this difference is significant again. And in Chile, we cannot accept that. Remember that Chile is our Sweden? Okay, look at that. You have more sexual aggression in a female prison than in a male prison. And Honduras, how can you explain that? Well, remember that the sexual aggression and prisons, most of all, I think never, but in prison, I can say that a sexual aggression has nothing to do with sex. No, the sexual aggression in a prison is always a punishment, you know? It's always a revenge, a punishment. You didn't pay something, or you did something wrong. And it's not a usual punishment, because there is a lot of things with sexual identity there. Look at that question that I took for this study. Since you have been detained, have you seen someone being forced to have sexual exchange? Because if you ask in Latin America, for example, to a man, did you get raped? For example, did you suffer sexual aggression? They will say no, because we have a taboo there. You cannot show that. You cannot say that. That is a really serious punishment. That is an humiliation. That has something to do with the dignity of person. It's not just beating you. It's not just a simple robbery, or it's not just I don't know, an insult. No, it's very serious. And we have now in our prisons who show number who really doesn't match with our predictors, doesn't match with our own intuition about what is a female person or what is a woman. There is here woman making sexual aggression to other women. Wow, sorry, I am really outspoken, but it's really interesting, fascinating, you know, a very sad situation, I know that, but from a criminological and a research point of view, how can I explain that? But this is punishment, remember, and this is really an humiliating punishment. It's not just beating. Okay, that was my presentation. That is my hypothesis. And that is I will try to explain that right now. Don't please be patient. But that is, I think, the table that when people look at that, all the people get immediately surprised and with no word to explain that. Women making sexual aggression to other women. But it's not a problem just of aggression. No, the problem here, remember, that is a punishment. So there is something there we can have to explain this punishment, you know? I think that is the worst punishment you can have in your life. I don't know a victim that is, I don't know, a victim who has no problem with that past, you know? They always remember that have so strong consequence for the victims. That is a really serious, offense, a serious aggression. So that was my hypothesis, and I will try a little bit to explain that with the next slides. What I think is that we have a serious problem of criminality in the region in the last 10 years, 15 years. And all the solution we get to that problem is to punish. The state in our countries just punish the crime. They don't make social prevention. It is hard to find a real and strong social, a long social program to prevent crimes in El Salvador and Honduras. We have little experience, but the biggest solution, what the society in Latin America, when you ask someone else in Mexico City, asking for more security, all the people say, we need more policemen and we need more prisons. Get the people, get the criminals in the prison, put them there and throw away the keys. We don't want to see that people anymore. So the prison was the solution we gave to the criminality, the only and the strongest solutions to the criminality in the regions. At the same time, we have economical problems, and we have a big proportion of our population who are women, who are single mothers, who are middle-aged women, and who start selling drugs to get a living. So to get money for the kids, to get money for the rent, to get money for food. So we have there like a new changing situation. The oldest and very typical picture of prisons in Latin America was a prisons with minor crimes committed by women. And drug selling, I'm not talking about women controlling like a film, a Mexican film, a woman controlling a drug cartel in the north of Mexico. No, that is middle-aged woman in a corner of Sao Paulo City, in a kiosk of Buenos Aires, or in a long street of Mexico City, I don't know, in Tepito, for example, selling drugs there, selling drugs just to live, to get some money, single mothers, middle-aged women, and all that women are now in prison. Look at that. That is the rising rates of incarceration in Latin America. And as you can see, the problem we have is that we have a lot of police on the street, because the people, the will of punishment of the Latin American people, they want police, and they want police on the streets where they can see it. And so they catch all that women selling drugs on the street, because this is easy, because they are not violent, and because they are very vulnerable, and they cannot pay a lawyer. So we have an increasing rate of female incarceration, and concentrated in that socio-demographic profile and this criminological profile. You know, look at that. 60% of incarcerated women were arrested for drug-related non-violent crimes. It's weird, doesn't it? But this, I think, is a consequence of our security policy. So the next one, that is just regressions about what I did here is to think, does the drug play a role? Maybe I think yes, and I use consumption of drug within the prison. That's the data coming from the inmate survey. Consumption in the previous month, consumption of drug prior to arrest, marijuana, inhalants, crack cocaine, ecstasy or tablets, heroin, mushroom, peyote, LSD, and I put out all this consumption that is really strong, like in Costa Rica, for example, they can consume gasoline too, you know, or some inhalants. So, and the two models, physical violence, and most of all, destruction of property or the consumption of drugs are really significant. So let me go to the results of that. Directly. we made a comparison of violence between men and women. And we have the conclusion that men are younger in prison, predictor of violence. They have committed more violent crimes, that is greater use of weapons and more victims suffering physical harm. We have longer sentences in the male prisons. We have less participation in rehabilitation programs. That is a strong proxy of violence, you know. And we have there in the male prison worse living conditions. But inside the prison, we have a contradictory situation because we have men that suffer more physical violence than women, guards and more violence. But when we go to the female prisons, we have more violence, more assault and sexual violence, and more property theft. What is going on there? Well, that is just an intuition. Our regression and our logistic regression says that the consumption of drugs prior to arrest increase violence inside the prison, you know, and there is an explanation for that. I will try to. The regression says too that the inmate who use crack or cocaine, that is strong drugs, before being arrested, you can have double levels of physical violence in female prison. I am talking about prison for women. And that our regression says too that women who consume marijuana and ecstasy before arrest, they can have up to 3 times more theft and more destruction of property than the women who don't consume marijuana or ecstasy. So I think it's just a suggestion. We have to do a lot of work to really prove that, but it's just a suggestion that maybe the drugs are really playing a role, that increasing rates of incarceration, increasing rate of women incarcerated that they were for having committed just one crime, sell drugs in a corner, and maybe they became addicts to drugs, or to drugs are playing another role. What? Now you have a drug market inside the prison. So let me get to discussions. What I think there, remember the predictors, all the classic models of violence, male violence, according to our feminist criminology, and I agree with that. The classic models of violence fall short in explaining violence in Latin American women's prisons. They didn't see that new problem. This is a new problem even for us. All the literature is based in male inmate violence. That's why they took the youngest people, the type crime, and so on. But they are not seeing that you can have a drug market in prisons with a weak systems, with corrupt guards, in a poor prisons, a prison just for poor people, you know, when you want to sell drugs, I don't know, that is a prejudice, but let me say that. When you want to sell drugs in Amsterdam, that is an internal joke that I hear in Brazil. Why the drug market of Amsterdam is so big as our drug market, and they are no violent, as our drug market is very, very violent. And all the criminology says that, well, because they are not poor. So that means that you can buy the drugs to sell it. But it doesn't work in Latin America. You get the drugs in consignment to pay after sell it. And there is the origin of the source of most of the problem. Because you are addict, you can consume that drug, or you don't sell, or you get robbed. Remember that the theft of belongings, that means drugs. And when you cannot pay for the drugs you get in consignment, well, you get violence, you get sexual violence as punishment, you get beatings, you get a lot of problems. That is what's going on in a female Latin American prison. That is my intuitive explanation. What makes the difference with Latin American prisons with the American prisons? Remember that Mexico is always Mexico, and a part of Latin America is always seen to the north. So what makes the difference with Latin American prison and American prisons? Well, we have a growing rate of female incarceration, drug dealers and drug consumers, or dealer and consumer at the same time. That's very usual. That is prior use of narcotics, that denotes addiction, and that denotes that you will need drugs in prison. We have no program for addicts in prison, and we have at the same time a very weak penitentiary system. So that means that admit and tolerate the drug traffic inside with no problems. And we have, when you have illegal drugs, a drug market inside a Latin American prison, even in a female prison, you will have higher rates of violence and victimization. So the last slide. There is another thing here, and you can ask me why we don't have high levels of violence, for example, in a Salvadorian prison where you have a drug market inside. Well, my easy answer will be, okay, but in a Salvadorian prison, you have a gang controlling the drug market. It's not too easy to kill someone else without the permission of the leader of the gang. But in the female prison, you don't have any gangs, because we don't put female gang members in prison. We put just the basic seller in the corner of your city, poor women who try to pay the rent, selling drugs, just it, and that became addicts maybe. So the final conclusion of my presentation is that proportionally, I know it's proportionally, but more women are incarcerated for drugs than men, and they are not a big cartel. No, it's not that profound. The second conclusion is violence and victimization associated with the consumption, possible dependence of drug. We have violence and victimization associated with the consumption of drug in prison. I mean, we have a drug market there. And I think that drugs, and I took here some literature to support my idea, that drugs maybe create illicit economies in prison where there is no pleasing means of coercing reluctant debtors to pay, and debts are frequently paid for with violence. When you don't pay, you get violence. And violence could be there a byproduct of the drug distribution system to ensure the payment of debts and reaffirm market control. That is very common and very regular in a male prison, for example, in Brazil, in Mexico, or in Central America. When you have 40 deaths in a weekend, you have two prison gangs competing for the market, competing for taking control of the distribution system of the market. Not just the drug, everything. You can find in a Salvadorian or in Honduras prison, you can find alcohol, you can find a TV, a plasma TV, better than mine. You can find whatever you can pay there. And that is an illegal internal market, and to control that, you use violence. You need violence. And here in the female prisons, the problem that you have higher levels of violence than in male prisons is that you don't have a gang taking control of the market. You have just people selling drugs in an informal market in the prison. Well, that's all. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gustavo. I thought this was very fascinating, especially because it's so counterintuitive and because it's not something that you would expect. So I found this one of the most fascinating presentations that I've recently seen. So I have...